All right. Well, I said, hold on, everybody. I didn't say something. Don't you listen? No, he doesn't. Okay. All right. Welcome to Muck You, where we rake the crap and call it like we smell it. Joining me to stir the pot and probably regret it is retired Air Force Colonel who's traded dog tags for truth bombs, Mo Davis. What's the latest sludge, Mo?
Hey, David, thanks, and welcome back, everybody. It's another beautiful fall day here in the mountains of western North Carolina. We're over a year into it. We're still recovering from Hurricane Helene, but things are looking a lot better this year than it did a year ago. And listen, we're got another great show today. You know, it seems like November of 2026 is a long way off, but it's coming up closer and closer. And we're seeing every day how important elections are. And certainly, you know, coming up in 2026, it's the next chance for the Democrats to try to regain some power. So today on the show, we've got Lauren French, who's the Director of Communications for the Senate Majority PAC. And one thing Lauren and I have in common is we're both GW, George Washington University graduates. So it's always great to welcome a fellow GW grad. Lauren, thanks for taking some time out to join us today.
Thanks for having me on. And I would go say go Colonials, which is what it was when I was there, but I think they have now name changed about 5 times. So go GW.
Yeah. I enjoyed my time there. It was a great school. And hey, so you're there in D.C. I imagine things are pretty quiet with we're in the second week of the government Trump down. So is it pretty quiet there in Washington?
You know, it is a little quieter just because there are so many people who are being forced to not work. So it's not a good thing that it's quiet. We are also dealing with, which is making it not quiet, the invasion of the National Guard. So obviously Trump has sent National Guardsmen into our streets and our cities to deal with the just horrific crime that we see all the time. No, I'm kidding. It's easy. Very safe. And they actually are doing beautification projects. So the men and women in uniform who should be protecting us are being asked to mulch and do some landscaping. So great use of the troops in DC.
Yeah. As someone who spent 25 years of my life in uniform, it really is disappointing to see American troops in American cities on American streets to harass Americans. But I guess if they're doing some mulching and picking up trash, they're doing some good, but certainly not what they signed up for. Well, listen, let's talk a little bit about the Senate Majority PAC. It was formed in 2011, so a relatively new organization, but one with a lot of influence. I noticed in the last cycle, you guys raised and spent about $390 million on Senate races. So if you would just, for the listeners, can you explain a little bit about, because they're certainly familiar with the DCCC and the official Democratic Party organizations, but how is the Senate Majority PAC different from that?
Of course. So we are a PAC, right? So we are somewhat that shadowy money that us Democrats don't love, but is absolutely necessary to compete and win. And our sole purpose is to either retain a majority for Democrats in the Senate or win the majority for Democrats in the Senate. So right now we are laser focused on making sure we can kick people like Susan Collins out of the Senate and elect a Democrat or replace Tom Tillis with Roy Cooper. So we go and do communications work. We do digital advertising. We work to create a system where we are showing in sharp contrast the absolute terribleness of the Republican Party and how it is not working within the battleground states that we compete in.
Right. Well, you talked about the shadowy money, and it does get a lot of talk. But I was looking over your list of donors, and there are a lot of names on there that people will know, like Christy Walton from Walmart, John Grisham, Steven Spielberg, and J.B. Pritzker, who I've become a really big fan of late. I was familiar with him, but boy, he's really been one of the Democrats really standing up and leading the charge and saying, no, we're just not going to take this shit anymore and fighting back. So you've got a really good group of donors that are funding good work. And it looks like, from past elections that most of your effort goes into, doing some of the work that the candidates can't really do themselves. And that's going after their opponents. Is that a fair assessment?
That is fair because we have found in a lot of these battleground states, our candidates, Democratic candidates, do better when they're talking about their agenda, their vision, and who they are. Voters want to hear those positive stories and visions and from candidates. It helps you win, especially too, because oftentimes we're running against absolutely extreme or extremely crazy Republicans who have gotten through a primary. And our candidates are the normal person in the race, and that helps. But you still need to do a lot of contrast with Republicans. So we are the ones who go in and talk about whether it is their focus or their lack of focus on the economy and prices, or lack of focus on healthcare and how they are giving tax breaks to the insurance CEOs who are about to raise prices on 22 million Americans who get their insurance through Obamacare. So we are the ones doing a little bit more of the negative work, but it's well-deserved negative work because it is talking about the truth of what Republicans and the Republican agenda and the Trump agenda is doing to real people on the ground. So we're doing a lot of that contrast. We're doing a lot of that negative, which is a little bit more fun. We're the rough and tumble, and we're the ones who are frontlining it, putting up a fight. So it's good work. It's important work, but it does also allow Democratic campaigns to talk about positive visions, which is what voters do want to hear from candidates.
Right. Well, this year there are 35 seats that are in play or up for will be on the ballot in November of 2026. Those 35, 22 are Republican held seats, so mostly Republican seats that are in play. Looking at the prognosticators, they're predicting it's going to be a tough road to hoe for Democrats. So how are you feeling about the 2026 race and the Democratic prospect of potentially picking up a majority in the Senate?
A lot better than I was in January, let me tell you. I think, I started the year, a lot of Democrats started the year, we had, in a triple minority, not feeling so great. But I think given the environment, the chaos that Trump and Republicans are creating, and also because we, as Democrats writ large, are recruiting and seeing some really phenomenal candidates get in and some Republicans retiring, much better than we were. And what is really great about this exact moment is we are so leaps and bounds further than we were in January, and we're still about a 1 year out from the election. And we are seeing that voters are talking more about their economic concerns. They're talking more about prices going up. They're talking more about healthcare. And those are all issues that Democrats really should be the competitive party on. So a lot better. I'm feeling a little bit less stressed. But, we have nailed recruitment in so many of these states. You have Sherrod Brown in Ohio, who has decided to take a run for his seat. What an awesome candidate to come back, especially in an election where we are hoping that the electoral environment favors Democrats. We have Roy Cooper in North Carolina, who is going to be extremely competitive against Michael Whatley, who is mostly just a partisan hack, who has never really done anything and is right now not doing a lot for North Carolina after Helene. So we're looking around and seeing excellent recruitment, excellent candidates. And I think that's going to really carry us through this next year. Because even in states that have primaries, which is not the work that we do, we have awesome candidates coming through, and we have people who are exciting the base and exciting younger voters. So it puts us just in a lot stronger position to be extremely competitive at this time next year when voters are starting to pay attention a little bit more to the Senate race. It's, people who are not us, who do this professionally and for a living and who pay attention to it every day. They're going to start cluing in, and they're going to start seeing these really, really approachable, really, really authentic candidates who are just being themselves and connecting. So that's great. And that puts us just, I think, far and away ahead of the Republicans who are spending their time shutting down the government because they don't want to lower healthcare prices for 22 million Americans, and who spent the summer passing probably one of the most disastrous bills, the OBB, the one big beautiful bill, the big beautiful betrayal, actually. And now they're going to have to defend that. And let me tell you, rural hospital closings, hard to defend. People getting kicked off Medicaid, hard to defend. tax breaks for the people who are raising all of our prices right now and make it harder for or more expensive to go to the grocery store, gas, utilities, all that. Not extremely popular. So it's a long way to say I feel a lot better than I did in January, and I'm really hopeful that in 6 months, if you ask me again, I'm going to feel a lot better than I did now. I think we're putting up competitive candidates, and we're talking about the right stuff. We're talking about the economy, and that will help us be successful.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you about feeling more optimistic now than at the start of the year. And certainly here in North Carolina, having Roy Cooper throw his hat in the ring, is a real shot in the arm, for Democrats here in this state. And as you said, Michael Whatley, you said he's mostly a partisan hack. I'd say he pretty much entirely is a partisan hack, because I can't point to anything he's done that's really helpful for the people of Western North Carolina. But it was a bit of a relief to see that, at one point, Laura Trump was thinking about running. And I think it helps here not having a Trump on the ballot. But Roy Cooper's got off to a great start. I think he raised nearly $15 million in the partial quarter that just closed out. So we're really optimistic. Roy has never lost a race, and won the governorship here twice. So we are really optimistic that North Carolina is going to go into the blue column. And Tom Tillis, I guess we're somewhat lucky. He occasionally does the right thing. He got reprimanded by the North Carolina Republican Party when he voted for marriage equality. And then when he told the truth about the big bad wealth transfer to the rich bill, that was kind of the final straw. So you folks are going to be helping out here in North Carolina?
Absolutely. But I mean, Michael Whatley is, I think, everything that's wrong with partisan politics, but politics in general. This guy is like I said, partisan hack, right? He ran the RNC, Republican National Committee. He also just essentially has worked as a lobbyist in all but name, and his entire record of doing anything is for big business and for Donald Trump. And the only reason he is even a contender is because of Donald Trump pushing him in the race after, as you said, Laura Trump declined to run, which would have been fascinating. I would have loved to see her sing her way through a primary and election. Probably a little frightening for us all to have that many music videos, but entertaining. But no, instead we get Michael Whatley, right, who was, after Helene, spent every ounce of energy screaming about lack of aid and resources, which were coming from the Biden administration. And now that he's been named this recovery czar by Donald Trump, he's never been in the state, and he's going around touting about resources that are coming in, but it's something like percent of what the region needs to recover. And I recognize Republicans have no shame. I recognize it. But I would be embarrassed to go to people who have lost everything, people who are still waiting on recovery and who have their homes are damaged, their homes were ruined, and be like, hey, 6%'s there and you should give me a win for that. It's just so unbelievably self-absorbed and not at all sympathetic to what people in North Carolina are going through to brag about that over and over again. So he's giving us a lot of material. He's beyond being like the recovery czar. He has been tapped by Trump to specifically focus on Western North Carolina, and he's completely MIA. He's not there at all. He's not showing up to these meetings that are talking about FEMA aid and recovery. So he's giving us a lot to work with, which is great. And then on the other side, you have Roy Cooper, who is a multiple-time winning candidate in North Carolina, who was a great governor, and all in all is exactly the type of Democrat that people get excited about. And he is so great at communicating, which is something our party does need more of. And you're just seeing it kind of pop all over with him going in and meeting people and really connecting. And it's like you said, money isn't everything. Money is important, but money isn't everything. But $15 million is a real feather in his cap to show that his candidacy is connecting with people. So ultimately, we should have a lot of fun in North Carolina because Michael Whatley is boring and bad, and Roy Cooper is amazing.
There's one of our lovely pauses. We'll insert a commercial there for Mo's next campaign. So, Lauren, tell folks where they can learn more about the PAC, and then I've got a couple questions on the other side of that.
Yeah. So much like everyone, we are trying to really invigorate how we communicate on social media. So we are on Twitter, which I will always call it, but you can also find us on TikTok and Instagram, communicating about democratic ideals and messaging, a little bit about the PAC, but it's not, we're not a candidate. It's not really about us. It's much more about bolstering Senate Democrats and candidates who are running for the office. So that's one of the reasons the work we do is really important. Is it's not about the work we specifically do. It's how the work that we do helps elect Democrats. So much more than finding out about us, I would love for you to go find out about Sherrod Brown and Chris Pappas and Roy Cooper and the other candidates that are going to get in these races, because really those are the ones who are going to bring really lasting change to what we're trying to do. Those are the ones who are on the front lines looking to make sure healthcare and prices go down, et cetera. So I'm not trying to not answer the question, but I'm just saying there are more important people in this environment, and we are just working behind the scenes to get them where they need to be.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, we like to get to know our guests a little bit deeper than normal shows, probably. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with politics and the PAC, and what gets you out of bed every morning.
Right now, it's electing Democrats to the Senate. No, that's a terrible answer. Right now, it's mostly a lot of coffee that gets me out of bed. But you mentioned Governor Pritzker earlier. Big fan. I'm from Chicago, so I'm a Chicago, Illinois, Midwestern girl. And I got involved in politics in kind of a different path. I was actually originally a reporter and working on Capitol Hill, covering the House and the Senate. And really, it came down to, I was putting a lot of time and a lot of energy into that career, but I didn't feel like I was helping people. I grew up my family used SNAP and other state benefits. My mother raised me as a single mother, and I was so lucky to have access to programs like that because they made my mom's job raising me easier. Her community college, where she was getting her associate's degree, had a daycare that was state funded, all of these different things. And I didn't feel like I was kind of paying that forward. So I left reporting and started working for various members of the House and Senate, including Adam Schiff. I then went to the Biden White House for a little bit. So have been around just doing various communications, chiefly jobs for House and Senate Democrats. And now I'm at Senate Majority PAC, where I am working on parts of our digital strategy, parts of our content creator strategy, our communication strategy, and really looking to redesign how we communicate with voters and how we're putting our message out into the world. Because the reporter I used to be, while I have so much respect for journalists everywhere, they're just not necessarily how you reach people, real people anymore. On the day-to-day. They're important, but it's not where regular Americans are getting their news.
That's true. You're absolutely right on that front. And I hadn't thought about that. And that's probably why we're putting so much more money into social media ads and everything else. But, one of the things that we talk about a lot on this show is Democrats getting tougher. And, Mo and I are not Johnny-come-latelys on this. I mean, we both have run campaigns in the 20 cycle that were pretty tough on our opponents, calling them exactly telling people exactly what we thought about them. And we got punished to a certain degree by our own party. I didn't think that was nice. But I assume you guys have learned some lessons over the last couple cycles and are going to come out hitting a little bit harder on some of these Republican candidates. Is that true?
God, I hope so. No, voters want to see Democrats standing up and fighting, not just against Donald Trump and not just against Republicans, but for them. They're looking for signs of life. And thankfully, a lot of people within the Democratic Party are doing that. It probably is slower than voters would have wanted, that you and me would have wanted, but we are really starting to see people recognize that the fight is what Americans want, because things are really tough out there. And voters just want to feel as if someone has their back and someone is looking out for them. And I think this Republican shutdown, this Trump shutdown, is a great example. You have Democratic senators really holding the line and saying, absolutely not on our watch. You are not raising healthcare costs by, in some cases, $2,000 on families. This is not going to happen. And if you want to shut down the government, Republicans, because you don't want to deal with healthcare, that's on you. But we are not going to rubber stamp your insane agenda that is just cutting and stripping the U.S. government and going to force families to make really tough choices between healthcare and food on the table, healthcare and their mortgage or their rent. It's working, right? You are seeing across the board, Americans are not only agreeing with us that Republicans are to blame, but they're also backing us up and saying, hold that line. Healthcare is more important. This is a fight worth having. And, we had some polling that we released earlier in the week that showed 71% of voters, of respondents in this poll, which were all likely voters, were saying it is absurd for Republicans to take the stance of shutting down the government instead of dealing on healthcare. And this was voters on the left, voters on the right, voters in the middle. So it's good to see that. I think by and large, voters are responding to this, us standing up and saying, hell no, on our watch, not on our watch. And that's exactly what the 2026 elections are going to be about, is fighting for healthcare, fighting for lower prices. But yes, the fight is really important. The Republicans have done this very well for a long time, and they are not afraid to be nasty and do gutter politics. And we have to meet them a little bit where they are, because if they're going to constantly use disgusting and just like foul and inaccurate language to describe who we are, I think the very least we could do is accurately describe them as, protecting pedophiles, for example, right now with Mike Johnson refusing to sit a duly elected representative, all because he doesn't want to vote on the Epstein files. And I'm not lying there. At least I'm being honest when I call them protecting pedophiles, but we should be doing it. And we should be constantly looking at how we can do contrast with Republicans that is showing them for who they really are, which is extremely uninterested in helping any sort of everyday regular American.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty good line of attack too. More. I imagine there's going to be a fair amount of morphing of Epstein with Republican candidates in TV ads, I hope, and connecting them to that horrible piece of history in our country. But so do me a favor and highlight the top 2 or 3 worst candidates you want to get rid of.
Can Susan Collins be 1, 2, and 3?
Amen to that. Yeah.
It is unbelievable how much she has gotten away by saying, "Oh, well, I'm so concerned about what the Trump administration is doing. This is horrifying. I'm going to write a letter about it." Or Brett Kavanaugh promised me he wouldn't get rid of Roe, and then turning the blind eye and allowing these terrible cabinet secretaries or terrible Supreme Court justices who lied during their confirmations. And she's not mad about it at all, because she knew. She's terrible. She's not an idiot. She knew that they were going to go after Roe. Anyone who had a pair of eyes knew that Roe was going to be the first thing on the chopping block when they got a majority on the Supreme Court. So I think Susan Collins, for me, is just the epitome of a sellout Republican who tries to pretend to stand up to Donald Trump, tries to pretend to buck her own party, but in fact votes with them 96% of the time, and is moving forward all of these terrible bills, right? She is going to talk about all throughout the campaign that she didn't vote for the one big beautiful betrayal, but she did vote to allow it to move to the floor. So she didn't want to vote for it because it's a terrible bill, but she wasn't going to stop it from getting a vote. And we knew at that point, if it got to the floor, it would pass. So in my mind, she's just as guilty as every single senator who voted for it, because if you really don't believe anything, you throw your body on the tracks to stop something.
Yeah, like exactly.
Sweeping Medicaid cuts, cuts to rural hospitals. The abortion debate is still actually very active in Maine, because the voting base there is very heavily skewed to older women who are the ones who actually fought to make sure we had the protections and the rights in Roe. It's not going to be what the centerpiece of a campaign is about, but I think there's a lot of very pissed off women in Maine who, said, Susan Collins, you promised me that I wasn't going to see my daughters and granddaughters and nieces lose this right. And now they have, and they're pissed about it. So Susan Collins, to me, I can talk about it all day. Number one, needs to go.
Yeah, and here's a crazy thing, Lauren, that I just don't understand about these people is, are they so desperate to keep this job that they just can't be themselves? I mean, what else could Susan Collins be doing? I mean, doesn't she have grandchildren? Doesn't she have a family? And that's the other thing that pisses me off about both Democrats and Republicans is they stick around way, way too long. So I'm not going to bang up on Chuck Schumer on this show because I know he's doing his best. But by God, some of these Democrats need to retire, and hopefully we can get rid of some of these goddamn Republicans that are such a waste of space. I don't expect you to comment on that, but I just don't understand why some of these politicians can't do what they pretend they're going to do. And if they lose, who gives a shit? They can go on to do something else and hang out with their family more often. The desperation to keep hold of their seats is baffling to me. Anyway, over to you, Mo, for the next question.
Yeah, Lauren, let me ask you. I know it's I think a contested race up in Maine to take on Susan Collins, but the one candidate that's really been getting a lot of attention is Graham Plattner, who is an oysterman. He's a military veteran. He's endorsed by Bernie. He seems to be, at least from a distance, a different kind of Democratic candidate. So do you think we're going to start to see more folks like that rather than your traditional, like to me, Roy Cooper is more of a traditional Democratic candidate, and Graham Plattner kind of seems like a different breed of candidate. So do you think we're going to see more of that in the future?
I really do. And I think one of the consequences of being in a triple minority, losing the White House, losing the House, losing the Senate, is that it does wake up people who are not normally politically focused. And it does make people imagine a different type of candidate, a different type of representative. And that brings people out of the woodworks. You saw this in 2018, right after the election, right after Trump was first elected. And we had a phenomenal class of freshmen come into the House. And those were, on the left side, AOC, more in the center left, the national security Democrats, who are now running, have won Senate races in Michigan, are now running for governor in New Jersey and Virginia. And I think you were only going to see different types of candidates coming out because there's such a pent up anger at what is happening to our country. And people are also, social media, the breakdown of kind of traditional media makes it a lot more accessible for someone who has a great message and who can communicate well to break through. We're not a primary organization unless it's talking about how bad Republican primaries are. But I think it's a good thing that across the board, you are having different types of candidates come in. And it's up for the voters to decide who they think is the strongest candidate to represent them. I think that's why Roy Cooper is running uncontested, is North Carolina voters feel like he is the strongest person to come up. I surely think that. But it is a good thing for our party to have different ideas and to have different spokespeople coming in and from different backgrounds. And that's something, there is always a little bit of tension and pressure, but it's something that across the board, people do appreciate, understand, and it's why we get to see a lot of various new candidates come across. I mean, you have, I think, 4 or 5 Democrats running in Iowa, amazing stories from those candidates. In Texas, 2 candidates, really unique backgrounds. Democratic candidates. So we're going to see just different spokespeople, and that's good for our party because when we talk about this big tent, right, that we are welcoming to so many different types of Democrats and so many different types of people to come on in, right, to take that first step in if you're not already inside. You do want to see people who have your background or who speak like you or who you feel like understand the struggles that you're going through in your life. And we can only grow and expand if we have people holding the tent poles who fit that criteria. So broadly speaking, I think it is a good thing for us to have new voices. And I'm excited to see not just in Senate primaries or House primaries, but who kind of pops up on TikTok and who pops up on Twitter talking about democratic politics in new ways.
Right. Yes. The last couple of months we've had like Adam Kinzinger and Joe Walsh and David Jolly on the show, and they've all talked about that if the Democrats could have a bigger tent, they could accommodate, not just the left, but, the center as well. They all said they could see themselves being Democrats, and Joe Walsh and David Jolly since then have become Democrats. I don't think Adam Kinzinger has yet, but it would be nice to see our party take a broader perspective because we do need a bigger tent than the tent that we've had. So I'm curious, like in Nebraska, we've got Dan Osborne running as an independent. It doesn't appear the Democrats are going to run a candidate. So is that the kind of race where your PAC potentially would get involved?
I'm not totally sure it would help Dan Osborne if the Senate Majority PAC got involved. The Democratic Leadership Aligned Senate Majority PAC. I'm not sure it would be helpful. And on the brass tacks of it, I want to win tough races. So I'm going to let Dan Osborne speak for the Dan Osborne campaign and the work that he's might be doing there. But, I think what it does look like is looking at states that we might not win this cycle, but that we need to be investing in for future cycles, because we can't rely on the same states to win a lasting Senate majority or to win the presidency. We have to be competitive in South Carolina, in Nebraska, in Kansas, in Louisiana, and Alabama, and Mississippi. And I'm going to say those states, and there's so many, when I talk to reporters about it specifically, I can feel them rolling their eyes at me about there's no way you're going to be competitive. But we won't be competitive unless we try. And until we're building up that state party and we are putting forward candidates that are compelling and confident and can speak to voters, then of course we will never win there, but it has to start somewhere. And I want to see candidates who, I want my party, I want our tent to include Kansas and Nebraska Democrats and New York Democrats, California Democrats, Oregon Democrats. For me, the idea of this big tent is that if you are aligned with us on core values, the value of human life and the civil liberties, and that people deserve rights and respect, and our country is best served when there's a functioning democracy, then I want you in our party. And I want you to feel like you're part of our coalition. We can disagree on other things, and there's a huge debate going on about kind of what that is. But I think we need to be more welcoming to the left and to the center. And, you mentioned two folks who were Republicans, now are Democrats. One of them is running for office as a Democrat. Right. We need those people, and we need the whole party to come together to recognize there's a lot of different ways to show up for our values as a Democrat, and not just one way. And I say this as someone who's convinced that every one of my opinions is really correct all the time. I think we have to be understanding that people do have difference of opinions on some topics, and that's still an acceptable thing, again, as long as they're with us on the big stuff, the democracy, the rights, the value of people as human beings, which are those washy topics that, not necessarily what we're talking about during elections, but I feel like what defines me as a Democrat is I want all people to have rights. I want people to be able to live and be treated with dignity as a human being. And if you can agree with me there, then I'm willing to work with you on whether or not, your feelings on taxes. I personally think we should tax the rich a little bit more, but I'm willing to hear other arguments about that.
Yeah. Well, listen, we talked about a couple of issues that are certainly, front and center. Healthcare, here in Western North Carolina, there's a projection there are 5 rural hospitals that will close because of the Medicaid cuts. And 2 of those 5 are right here in the mountains of Western North Carolina, where there's a healthcare shortage to begin with. And it's certainly going to get worse after the big, beautiful bill. And we've talked about the economy and pocketbook issues, which to me, it's a shame that the Democratic Party lost the working class, because we really are the party that has their interest at heart rather than, trickle down. They've gotten trickled on, for too long. But I'm curious. So you did a couple of years at the State Department as a senior advisor back during the Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, as a retired military guy, I think most military folks are big supporters of foreign policy and diplomacy because the best wars are the ones we don't fight. And I think the public had the perception that we're spending 20, 30, 40% of our tax dollars overseas, where the defense or the State Department budget was a rounding error in the grand scheme of things in the federal government. So I'm curious, number one is, having been at the State Department, what your take is on what's happened to it since you left. And number two is, does that fit into the narrative on the 2026 election with the other issues that we've talked about?
Well, I will say this, it's a lot cheaper to not fight a war through diplomatic efforts than it is to fight a war. And there is a lot less calamity, chaos, and loss of life through diplomatic. So I believe in the core mission of the State Department because, I think in a lot of ways it is there to make sure we aren't entering into endless wars like what defined most of my childhood and into my adult life. And I think the cuts there are really harmful to that mission. And if we are not investing in diplomacy, we will be investing in more wars. And I am of the belief, having, again, the Iraq and Afghanistan war is probably one of the most significant events that I watched us go to as I was, aging from being out of a child. And it felt to me as if we might never not be at war for so long until we did pull out of Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't want to return to that. And therefore I strongly believe that the good work that the people at the State Department do, that USAID did, is critical to keeping Americans safe and protecting our national security. I don't think this is going to be a huge part of the 2026 campaign. I think people are pretty laser focused on rising prices and the impacts of tariffs and the fact that, the average family is going to spend $5,000 more because of the Trump tariffs than they would have otherwise, and healthcare costs, utility costs. But I do think that people are paying attention to the chaos of DOGE, the chaos of the Trump administration, and they might not clock it as cuts to the State Department. But I do think they will clock it as, I don't want someone going in and just slashing the government, because eventually that trickles down into something that impacts their life, whether they are kind of seeing it directly or indirectly. But broadly speaking, some of the people I worked with at the State Department were some of the most dedicated public servants I have ever met. They so much time and effort into the work that they did, and so much of it was so critically focused on delivering aid to people who needed it, delivering HIV and AIDS prevention work via PEPFAR. So it is terrible what's happening in the State Department. It is short-sighted. It's going to make us less safe. It will lead to more war and chaos. But I do think that the broad spectrum of the 2026 elections will be more of an economic focus, because that's what people are feeling every time they go to the grocery store and every time they have to pay a bill.
No, it's interesting because it seems like some folks, they took things for granted, like, the cuts to USAID. A lot of the food relief that we were providing, American farmers were selling their products, and all of a sudden that market dried up. Or, the cuts to the SNAP benefits. Again, a lot of the farmers were providing food to the programs through SNAP. And so there are collateral effects to a lot of these things that are getting slashed and cut that people tend to take for granted until they realize it has an adverse impact on them. But hey, let me ask you, we've talked about Nebraska and North Carolina, a little bit about Georgia, Michigan, and Maine and Ohio. Is there another state or two that you think folks ought to be paying attention to in the Senate races?
So right now, we don't have a candidate in Alaska, but I actually do think Dan Sullivan is extremely weakly positioned.
Mm-hmm.
He is rubber stamping a lot of the Trump administration chaos. He is out there just every single day not fighting for Alaskans. So depending on the candidate that gets in Alaska, I'm really excited to see how we can be competitive there. Talked about Iowa and Nebraska, New Hampshire, right? New Hampshire is hilarious right now because they're having the most insane primary where you have someone who wrote an op-ed that Donald Trump was a loser and in John Sununu, and you have Scott Brown who got in, and nearly every Republican was like, can you please get out? We don't really like you. And they're both trying to pretend as if they're these like super Trump MAGA guys now. And they're snipping at each other. And they're running against Chris Pappas, who is a really awesome House candidate and will make a really awesome senator there. So I think that's really interesting. And then you got to look down at Georgia, too. Jon Ossoff, a phenomenal sitting senator running for re-election, has done wonders for the state of Georgia, is out there fighting for veterans and healthcare, and also is one of those new, younger Democrats that we point to when we talk about just great communicators who are reaching different types of Americans. And then there you're having like a civil war among the Republicans. You have Buddy Carter and Mike Collins, who are MAGA to their core and are trying just to get Trump's attention. They're, like little kids jumping around, hoping that the teacher will call on them. And then you have Dooley, who the best I can see is the fact that his father was a coach, is the reason he should be a U.S. senator. Feels a little carpetbaggery. I know he's not. He was born in Georgia, played for Georgia, et cetera. But he hasn't been there for a while. And I'm not the biggest football person, but I do have a Georgia football fan on my team. And what he told me was that this is one of the worst coaches in college football history. And I'm going to take his word for it. So I just don't think that makes you a really great candidate for U.S. Senate, that you lost a ton of games while being a collegiate football coach.
And he was the coach at his dad, Vince Dooley, was kind of a famed Georgia coach, but Derek Dooley was a coach at Tennessee, which is the arch rival of Georgia. So he was a coach.
And now he's pretending, coming to try back. Like, we have a term for that. Carpetbagger.
Yeah. Well, and Jon Ossoff had a great quarter too. We talked about Roy Cooper's fundraising. I think I saw where John took in $12 million and has about $21 million banked for the race. So again, it's a shame that money counts so much, but it's a pretty good indicator that folks are really interested in keeping him in office.
Yeah, I think he is doing just a really great job setting up that campaign and setting up to win in Georgia. And the Republicans shouldn't just spend their time fighting it out and, seeing who comes out of what is going to be an expensive and messy primary with a lot of hurt feelings because they're so whiny. And then they can send their limping candidate up against Jon Ossoff any day. So I'm really, Georgia is really fun in that sense. And then the messiest of them all is Texas, where you have three Republicans, Ken Paxton, like probably one of the most corrupt public officials of our lifetime, John Cornyn, who is just wildly unpopular with the Trump folks and the MAGA base, and then Rep. Hunt, who got in despite every single person in Republican politics being like, please don't get in. You are not helpful here. But he got in anyways, so you got to love an ego. And what's great about that race is they're going to spend $100 million just to nominate a Republican who 1/3 of their party maybe likes. The rest cannot stand. And I don't know if Texas is going to be competitive. We're far too early to say that. I hope it is. I am a constant optimist that Texas will be a state that we can be consistently competitive in. But I do know that no matter what, that will be the messiest, dirtiest primary I think we see. And I imagine it's going to be really entertaining for those of us watching because you got everything. You got divorce, infidelity, this like split between Trump factions of the party. So it should be fun. Texas is one to look out for, if only because they're so messy, and it also is just it shows just such the complete failure of the John Thune, who is the Senate Majority Leader, the leader of the Republicans, to manage these primaries. They were doing everything they can to keep Rep. Hunt out, and he got in anyway. So, it is a symbol for everything that's wrong with the candidates that they put up. But it should be a fun one for the rest of us to watch.
It makes you feel sorry for him, though, doesn't it? Lauren, come on.
Absolutely not. I do not. Nope, hard. That's like, if I look for other things in front. No, I do not feel sorry for Ken. You can't make me feel bad for Ken Paxton.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I hope they burn it to the ground. So, Lauren, you're a Chicagoan at heart.
Yep.
And Cubs or the Sox? You're a North Side girl, I'm sure, aren't you?
I'm not. I am actually. I should clarify. I'm a suburbs girl.
All right. That's not Chicago. I love it when people say, I'm from Arlington. I'm from Chicago. And then you ask them where they live and they say Arlington Heights. That's not Chicago. Come on.
I think that if you are not living in Illinois, you get to claim Chicago as like the nearest big city that people don't know Crystal Lake.
Yeah. My God, that's even further than Arlington Heights. Holy shit. That's Wisconsin. Come on.
But in my heart of hearts, I feel like an Illinois Midwesterner. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, the city I identify most with is Chicago.
Right. Fair enough.
And in that case, in my very fledgling baseball allegiances, it was the Cubs growing up. I'm now more of a Nationals fan because I have lived here for a while. But the thing I do love most about Chicago is the Chicago hot dog.
I was going to ask you. All right. Ketchup or mustard or just mustard?
No, you don't. No ketchup on hot dogs.
Exactly. Good answer.
No ketchup
Lauren.
on hot dogs. No, but the Chicago dog, right? It's tomato sweet relish, poppy seed. And it's and pickles, pepper, like it's so good.
Right, but
it is a gourmet hot dog.
But you can't have it before 2:00 in the morning, no. Usually, so it kills me when I see people ask for ketchup on their hot dog in Chicago and they don't get it. So anyway, be aware, folks. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for taking some time. And that's a wrap on another glorious mudslide of Muck You. Big thanks to my co-host, Colonel Mo Davis, and his lovely wife, Lisa. He could definitely married up. Shout out to Lauren French for spilling the Senate tea without spilling the Super PAC beans. Thanks to Hassan for your help with this show. This is David Wheeler signing off. Stay skeptical, smell the bullshit, and when MAGA pisses you off, tell them, Muck You.
This has been Muck You, co-hosted by Colonel Mo Davis in Asheville and David Wheeler in Spruce Pine, North Carolina. Thanks to our guest today, Lauren French with Senate Majority PAC in Washington. Muck You is produced by American Muckrakers. Copyright 2025. Listen to additional episodes with Errol Musk, Anthony Scaramucci, Paul Bagala, Mark McKinnon, and others at AmericanMuckrakers.com. Please subscribe and support our work on Substack. Thanks for listening, and y'all come back for the next episode of Muck You.